Can you all hear me? Can folks hear me? Yes, great. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to be very mindful of your time. I greatly appreciate you all signing in to join me tonight as I launch the Burnett Group's e-learning lab. I am very excited to be able to share with you all bringing learning to your living room or dance studio or gym or shop or wherever you are currently. So thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to join me tonight. As most of you know, there are probably a couple of new folks on the call. It looks like from the attendees list, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of folks who are on here. So please feel free to send feedback that you have, suggestions, what works, what doesn't work. My goal is to make the e-learning lab a monthly occurrence and provide resources for the general public. A little bit of background information for those who are a little bit less familiar with me in this particular setting. We'll come back to the session goals in just a second. But I want to share just a little bit about me, about the Burnett Group, so folks know who's in front of them and who's talking if you are not familiar. So my name is Erica Burnett, and I serve as the principal and founder for the Burnett Group, LLC. I officially launched my LLC in 2016. And I say that I didn't necessarily create it, but it has been a manifestation of how I've chosen to exist here in the national community for my entire professional career. And so what I notice as a service provider here in Middle Tennessee is that we do not do a great job investing in ourselves. We pour into our clients, we make sure that the people that we are responsible for are taken care of, and yet and still a lot of times what I see is burnout. And oftentimes that burnout exists at the hand of us not realizing that the most value add that we bring to an organization, to a community, to a space is ourselves. And making sure that we are doing everything humanly possible to cultivate who we are, how we exist, and how we show up in those spaces, specifically in relation to other folks. So the mission of the Burnett Group is to inspire professionals, deepen impact, and challenge the status quo of service delivery. And one of the ways I like to think about that mission is using this particular framework. If you've been in just about any training with me, you've probably seen this framing. For those of you, this may be a little bit of a new concept. Let me describe or explain this paradigm a little bit. Oftentimes when we enter into spaces for professional development, we are worried about that person over there. How do I work well with them? How do I fix them? How do I make sure that they fit in whatever the boxes that I've created that they're supposed to fit in so that I can do and exist in a way that feels comfortable for me? However, I think the fault in that is that we don't allow time and space, first off, to acknowledge self. And so a lot of what we will do tonight, some of which will be a little bit uncomfortable for folks, my guess, is that we're going to take a deep dive into self. The topic for this particular webinar has to do with not taking it personal. And you may have already been able to guess this, but the it has a lot to do first and foremost with us. When we enter into a space, we are automatically our own responsibility, and what occurs there and how we react to it is completely contingent upon the toolbox in which we have crafted for ourselves. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to dive a little bit into our own personal triggers, our own personal blind spots, and really unpack who we are and how we choose to exist in a space in relation to the you. Who is that other person? Who is the other party? How are they allowing us? How are they setting the stage for our engagement? How are we going to work together? And that's that part in the middle. So I want to make sure I'm very clear that this is not about how do I deal with that person from the perspective of needing to fix something that is external, but it is more so how do I think about self in a way that allows me to show up in a way that is reflective of moving the dial or moving the needle forward. So let's talk a little bit about goals. Maybe, if the PowerPoint will let me be great. So what are we going to do during this session? We're going to identify some of our own personal triggers. What are those things that make us tick? Oftentimes we think about it in relation to our family and our friends. Very rarely, though, does that carry over into the workplace or vice versa. Some of us are really good about identifying how to be great professionals, and we sort of suck when it comes to some interpersonal stuff with individuals who we may care about, who are close to us, those who are in closer proximity, not a safe space to really explore. We're going to gain a more comprehensive understanding of what interpersonal dynamics really show up when there is conflict or problems. And we're going to unpack how external factors can really contribute or exacerbate some of the conflict. Oftentimes, it's never just the isolated instance, right? It is one drop in the bucket of many, many, many other drops in that bucket. And we have to think about the bucket, and we have to think about the water, right? There are all these other factors that come into play. And finally, I'm going to leave you with best practices. I never want to walk away from a space of learning without folks feeling like they have some tangible to-dos, that they have what I like to call sort of your cheat sheet, go-to guide, as well as some homework. So yes, there will be some homework by the end of our session together. So we are going to get started by doing a little bit of an icebreaker. So it looks like quite a few of my folks right now are on the move. So if you need to utilize the chat box, feel free to use the chat box. If you are able to access your cell phone and utilize the text messaging system, I'm going to attempt to switch screens, and we're going to use Poll Everywhere. So per the slide that I had on the screen prior to us getting started, if you can open up the text message stream that you should have logged into my poll using. So that was texting Erica Burnett 496 to the number 22333. And what that should have done was logged you into my poll. So you should have received a message that notified you that you were logged in to the poll. So I see some folks are pausing me right now on the video, which probably means you are using your phone to go to that text message, which is exactly what I need you to do. As long as you can hear my voice, I will guide you through the process. So if you look on the screen, there's a question. And this is sort of our warm-up so we can get used to this polling system. And my question is, who's in the living room? We are learning today together in this communal space, and I would love to know a little bit about who I have the pleasure of speaking with. So what you can do is, from that text message stream, all you have to do is reply to the message using the indicators on the screen. So for those of you who are on the phone, I'm going to talk this through really slow in case you can't see my screen. You're going to open up your text message application, and you're going to send a message. The recipient is going to be the number 22333. So on my phone, instead of texting mama, I would put in the actual number 22333. And in the body of my text, I'm going to type all in one word, Erica, E-R-I-K-A, Burnett, B-U-R-N-E-T-T, then the numbers 496 all together. So that's Erica Burnett 496. And you should receive a message in about 20 seconds or so that says you're logged into my poll. Once you're in your poll, the poll that I currently have active is on the screen. And you should be able to everyone should be able to see my screen now, if you couldn't before. And the question is, who are you? So I'm curious, are you here as a service provider? If so, you're going to text A and press send. Are you here as a team member? You're a part of a team and trying to think through how do you work more successfully with folks. I want you to type B and press send. If you're here as a manager and thinking about your role as a supervisor, I want you to text C and press send. If you are here as an executive level leader needing to navigate lots of different dynamics, I would like for you to press D and press send. If you're here as a collaborator, meaning I work with a whole lot of people in a lot of different settings, I want you to text E and press send. And then if you are here, I'm just going to call it as a member of the beloved community, meaning you can be thinking about your relationship with your friends, you can be thinking about your dynamics with your family, you can be thinking about, I don't know, a board that you serve on, or just trying to think of your own personal development. Then I want you to text F and press send. And we're going to wait about 30 seconds or so. It looks like the responses are coming in. And what you all can see on the screen from the magic of the internet should be the responses to the poll, so you can tell who you are sharing this space with. Really helpful information for me. I realize this may be a little limiting for those who are just on the phone. If you can bear with us for just another minute or so. Okay, so per the responses, as of right now, it looks like we have the majority of folks are providing some type of service, which absolutely we're thinking about taking it personal. That it becomes a major thing if that it is what I am providing for you as a professional, as someone who is in this space. And then we have folks who are existing as team members as well as managers. And so thinking about what are those interpersonal dynamics that come into play and how am I internalizing them in a way? Okay, now that we've warmed up just a little bit, let's see if we can try our hand at another poll. So for this next poll, I want you to think about those areas of, I'm going to call it the ouch, and we'll talk about that a little bit on the next screen. So if you were to identify when or where, sort of what shows up for you when you are taking it personal, what's the framing? Is it around an aspect of your identity? So I'll provide an example. When someone asks me, so what is that? And they, you know, reach for my hair or desire to touch my hair, which I don't have an issue with explaining my hair, but the taking it personal becomes a matter of my hair is different from yours, and that is an aspect of my identity. And so it sort of feels like a disconnect because we don't share in this particular aspect of our identity. Then I would type in A for this particular poll. Is it around your integrity or your intentions? So someone often target your intentions, whether it's behind your words, behind your actions, or maybe the integrity of your work, the quality of your work, etc. Then you're going to type B and press send. You're still in that same text message stream. Is it around your work product? Is it something that I actually provided for you? This is a actual product or a deliverable, or it was maybe questioning my process. So one of my strength finders is content, meaning I am a hoarder of information. By the time I present something to you, I have done all of the work to get to this point. So then you maybe questioning or challenging my work product is an ouch for me that I take personal, but it's based on the process that I've executed thus far. That's going to be C. Is it how someone delivers the message? It's how they showed up in a space that is a conflict for me. That's going to be D, and you're going to press send. Does it have more to do with external stressors? I just had a rough day. The kids were crying all morning. I was running late. The car got a flat tire. I got to work. There were all these emails. And then you walked into my office and asked me the one thing that I really did not have time to work on. So I felt attacked and took it personal. Does it have to do with what was happening more external? And then there was that one drop in the bucket. If so, you're going to type F. And then my last option would be around expectations. Is it more that I expected more of this person than how they showed up? And so that's why I took it personal. So I'll give us just a couple minutes to explore those options. A, aspects of your identity. B, integrity or intention. C, work product or process. D, delivery method, how someone actually communicated this. E, external stressors that just sort of come to a head with that one drop in the bucket. Or F, is it around expectations? If you could send that in that text message string and allow us to see, that would be great. I'm going to give us a couple more seconds here. Okay, thank you all. So it looks like we're pretty evenly split. A third, well, we just threw another wrench in there. So it looks like folks are identifying various areas between aspects of your identity, integrity or intentions, which shows up a lot, the method of delivery, so thinking about what does positive communication look like, as well as expectations. We have one more now that you all are becoming pros at this poll everywhere technology. And this last question, I really want you to think about in that moment of your ouch. What does that look like for you? How does it show up? What would you use to describe that? As my computer is trying to catch up with us a little bit. So I want you, this is going to create a word cloud. It's one of my favorite pieces of technology to use. And what can you put more than one answer for these things? So Hallie's asking a question, not for the polls, Hallie, but for this one that we're about to use right now, you can. So for this particular poll, you can type more than one word in, but please type it like one word at a time, and then it'll populate on our screen. So this is the question. Describe how your ouch shows up. So in my physical body, my ouch, when I feel attacked and I'm taking it personal, my temperature rises. I can feel my temperature rising in my body. I start to perspire, right? And I tend to get a little louder and to get a little bit more in someone's face, right? For other folks, it may be, I shut down. That's her. Okay, I have some agreements over here. For other folks, it can be, I shut down. I'm going to flee. I don't want to deal with it anymore, right? So I want you to think about how the ouch shows up for you and text maybe one word at a time. And it can be as many words as you want, as long as you press send in between the comments. And it should populate on our word cloud here. So I'm going to give us just a couple moments to think about this. And I will say this is not just for me to collect data. This is part of your processing. How often do we think to ourselves, what does that look like for me when I'm taking it personal, right? Is it, do I become defensive? My face, okay? So someone's saying, you see it all over my face. Mine is, I need a little space. I'm going to take it personal and I'm going to come back and reflect. But right now, I need to cut you all the way off, right? So give folks a couple minutes and just defensive, share your thoughts in a few words. So for folks who are not on the, who aren't joining us via the internet, I'm going to read a little bit about what folks are sharing. So we have that we shut down. You see it all over my face. I become a little defensive. Maybe I get loud. I walk away. Yell, right? So I'll share this. Part of the reason I love using polling to open up a dialogue, so it gets a little volatile, is that it provides a safe space for us to realize we are not alone in this. We all take things personal. We just wear it different. I've been told by many of folks that I may be a little emotionless or a little stoic. However, I take things very personal. The extra faces right now from the people who know me on the screen, not necessary. However, how I take things personal looks and shows up very different from other folks. I see one saying, I'm quiet. I ask questions. I become uninspired. Absolutely. So what does that motivation look like? I get a headache. So all of this really helps us. Remember, we're starting with the me. I have to know my own triggers, face and body language. I cut you off. So I'm reading some of the responses for those of you who are just on the phone. Thank you so much for sharing. So cry. So the emotions are real. The physical reaction is real. What we need is real. Our triggers are real. And so let's just briefly, I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes or so and just give you all a high-level overview of some best practices, some things I've learned, and some things that I think we can carry with us along the way. So if you bear with me for just a second, I'm going to try to change my view. One day I'm going to have an assistant. Until then, it shall be just me. So I want to start here. Some of you have seen this, some of you have not. I like to bring this into conversations, especially presentations that can be a little difficult. I never want folks to feel, as an educator and as a learner, I never want folks to feel attacked in a space. We are, however, going to hold each other accountable to have some really difficult conversations. And so one of the things I like to model is putting myself on the hot seat. I'm not sure how many of you have participated in or created an identity circle. If you're interested in how to do this and craft it and walk through sort of the worksheet, I would be more than happy to share. If you want to shoot me an email, I'll be sure to get you the instructions and the worksheet to this. An identity circle is exactly what it looks like. We take what we call the primary dimensions of our identity, which have been sort of parceled down into 10 dimensions. So they're like your age, for instance, your sex, all of those things that I like to call the boxes that we check. And this is language I typically use in training. So when someone says on a census or on an application, are you this or that? Those are considered our primary dimensions of identity, our race, right? Socioeconomic class. Then we have those second and tertiary aspects of our identity, which dive a little bit deeper into our personal experiences. These are those things that by looking at someone, you probably wouldn't recognize them to be true. However, they show up, and they show up sometimes in really, really covert ways that we may have difficulty navigating or wading through. So I'll give you an example. For me, on my identity circle, I have that I am African American. That term is important to me because I believe in the lineage of putting African before American as opposed to Black. So that is a part of my identity circle. I am female, I am single, and I consider myself to be a spiritual being. I'm also a millennial. So this was not on my identity circle 2, 3, 4 years ago. However, with all of the conversation around how generational differences are showing up in the workplace and in dynamics, my particular generation is one of attack and is often on the chopping block a lot. And so for me, this aspect of my identity has shown up more boldly, not because it matters to me, but because it matters to those around me. So when we think of our identity circle, it's not just how I see self, but it's also how others see or project on me. That's going to be really important when we start to unpack those different layers of dynamics. I am able-bodied. It is not something that I'm acutely aware of, which is why it's on the outside of my identity circle, until I am facilitating in a space where I have to think about other individuals who are differently able, right? So as an aspect of my identity, I don't think about every morning that I have all of my faculties and the abilities of my functions of my body until I am in a space as a trainer and I'm, constructing an activity where someone cannot participate because of their limitations. Everyone sort of understand how this, the aspects of identity work. So I'm gonna pause here just for a second because one of the things I wanna focus on is this term, the top of my identity circles, and it says focus hope. For those of you who are maybe not from Michigan, you probably don't know what focus hope is, but focus hope was actually the government subsidy warehouse where individuals who were on government subsidies would go and get their food. And until I was about 13 years old, I thought everyone shopped at this warehouse. I thought everyone had vouchers and everyone went and stood in line and everyone picked out their beans or their protein that had a picture on it, not a word, because you're not supposed to be able to read, or they assume that folks can read, right? And many couldn't. And so that was a normalized experience for me. It wasn't until I moved to a different state and into a very different community that I realized that was not the norm for other folks. Why is it on my identity circle? Because when I am engaging with students who live in Casey Homes, which is a housing development here in Nashville, or I'm working with young people who attend one of our lower end or schools where there's a high level of poverty, I am acutely aware of a shared experience to a certain extent, right? So I carry that experience with me. I don't necessarily lead with it. It's not something that you would know about me. It's not on my resume. However, it is a part of the fabric of who I am. Therefore, I carry it with me every single day, just like being without a child, just like being African American, just like being female, right? Just like being a spiritual being in a community. I carry all of this with me every day, and so does that other person. So we're going to switch gears. a little bit. Maybe. If technology will let me be great. So I want to talk about the cycle of socialization. And right now what I'm giving us are some building blocks to have the conversation. So some of you may be familiar with this cycle of socialization. I like to do what I call the C-spot run version of the cycle. The cycle of socialization works like this. We are all born. We are born essentially a blank slate, and then we are taught. We are taught things about life. We are taught things about experiences. We are taught things about behavior. We are taught things about people. We are taught. And then life reinforces what we are taught, or it negates it, okay? And then we teach. We teach children. We teach those around us. We teach even unconsciously with how we show up and how we act, right? So my easy version of this, and I'm so glad she's on this call because I don't think she's ever heard me use this example, is that I have an amazing friend who used to be petrified of dogs. And she was petrified of dogs because she was told that dogs bite. And then she had an experience where a dog bit her. And therefore, she continued to perpetuate this cycle, attempted to perpetuate this cycle with her child around dogs being dangerous and ferocious animals. Unfortunately for her, her village are dog people. Like, we're all dog people. Mine is actually sitting on the floor behind me. Love you, girl. I mean it. And because we're dog people, we had to interrupt the cycle of socialization for our now village child. What does that look like? It means that she learned how to train my dog. It means that when she saw the dog, I talked her through what she could not do, and she relearned behavior based on this interaction. We interrupted the cycle of socialization, literally using my C-spot run version, right? Okay, what does that look like in the workplace? What does that look like in engaging with maybe individuals of different identity or just in challenging circumstances? I will be very transparent. I put myself on the hot seat. I did not have very positive interactions with women, Caucasian women, in the workplace. There were many instances where I was called combative, difficult to work with, my intentions, all those things we listed in the poll, right, were named, and all the triggers were fine. All the triggers were fine. You couple that with an identity circle, right, where I grew up in an all-Black community with all Black professionals, all Black teachers in an all-Black school. Power was Black in my community. And then I show up in a space where power, which we'll talk about in a second, looked very different and had to navigate based on aspects of my identity very different. So how did my cycle of socialization shift? Now this experience is reinforcing sort of a negative ideology that I had about a certain population. What were my choices? I can continue to perpetuate that cycle, or I can interrupt it. Sometimes the interruption happens unconsciously, meaning what? You have interactions with individuals of that particular identity that shift how you're thinking about your cycle of socialization and shift what we think about perpetuating. So I had individuals who were Caucasian women who I learned to trust and who deeply trusted me and who saw me for me in a way that I did not see reflected in my previous interaction, and that allowed me an opportunity to shift my cycle of socialization. Oftentimes, when we interact with individuals, we are just one part of their cycle of socialization. And they have no idea that that even exists, right? Like, how many of you have even heard of the cycle of socialization before tonight? That it's not something we carry with us on a daily basis, that we're aware of on a daily basis. And so we also have to make room and be gracious towards those who need some interruption in their cycle of socialization, either in a positive way or a negative way, right? To sort of shift that cycle. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to throw them in the chat box. I will do my best to try to address them as I go. So I alluded to this. Everyone take a deep breath. If we were in person, I would probably make us get up and stretch because it's going to get a little heavy for a second. Another layer that's really important for us to understand is how power and privilege show up in these dynamics. What does that mean? Let's look at the words and then we'll talk about some examples. Baseline, power. Power is the ability to do or act, period. When we're thinking about organizing, when we're thinking about social justice, when we're thinking about engagement with other populations or even ourselves or systems that are at play, power, by definition, is the ability to do or act, meaning I am able to leverage my positional power, right? I'm able to leverage my money, financial power. I'm able to leverage collective power. I'm able to leverage the hierarchy in which we exist in a way that I can do or act or move, okay? So that is, by definition, how we look at power in these structures or instances. What are some of the other contributing factors here? We have various aspects of diversity, like class, ethnicity, sexual orientation, physical functioning. Going back to that identity circle, a lot of the aspects that are reflected there. Sometimes membership in these groups are a result of circumstances, and sometimes they're a result of birth. Oftentimes when we start to get really, really into the nitty-gritty around issues of diversity, issues around equity, issues around power and privilege, we tend to get very defensive because a lot of that is unearned. Some of it is unearned. And so if we look at our next column, unearned privilege has to do with systems that are in place that are beyond our control, that position us based on various aspects of identity for power, okay? So what does that look like? This screen shows a few examples of various aspects of diversity or aspects of our identity and where power lies. So when we talk about power showing up, and this is at a very neutral space, when we talk about how power shows up, there is a dominant or agent, and then there is a target or non-dominant. This is based on a couple things. It is based on sort of circumstantial communal norms. It is also based on very, very specific instances. And I'll talk you through an example in just a minute, but let's walk through this chart. If I am thinking about sex, the biology of who I am, in this country, in America, in 2018, which population would we say is the dominant or has agency in a space overall? Who would you all name? Can someone throw something in the chat, or I can take you off of mute?
I'm gonna vote male.
Off of mute, male. Yes, absolutely. So if we're thinking about who has power, Hallie, I'm gonna mute you back though again. Thank you. If we're thinking about who has power, who is the dominant, it would actually absolutely be the male. So that would put target or non-dominant as female, right? Everyone following along with me? So if we move down to race, again, United States of America, 2018, we fill in that chart. My dominant would be white. My non-dominant or target would be non-white. Everybody else, right? And if I think about language, it would be English as dominant. My non-dominant or target would be non-English. Make sense? And then what's my last example? Physical ability. Obviously, my dominant would be able-bodied. My non-dominant or target would be differently abled in some way, shape, or form. Why is this important? When we think about how power shows up, when we're taking it personal, if I'm a teacher and I am there's a confrontation with a student in a space, and this student is yelling and calling me everything but the child of God, and I am deeply offended to the point where after I rectify the situation, I still don't want to let that child back in my classroom. Or no, they need to go stay, you know, with Miss Hensley for the rest of the day because they don't belong in my class. What's at play here? Number one, let's walk through our slides. That kid brought their entire identity circle with them that day. And you know what that identity circle could include? They didn't eat that weekend. Their mama didn't come home that night because she had to work 2 or 3 jobs. There was a shooting in the neighborhood that day, and the policeman that showed up at that door just happened to look like you, right? They are bringing all of that as a part of their identity circle in that space. How does power show up in there? You are the teacher. And if you are a teacher of a different race, if you're a teacher of any of the identities that live in a dominant, right, you have positional power in this space. This instance was one drop in the bucket, and You are the one who holds at a systems level, right? That trickles down to that interpersonal level. You hold positional power over that student in that instance. You're the adult, that's power. You're a teacher, that's power. If you're of a ethnicity that is different from the child and you are a dominant, that's power, right? So all of those things come into play when we think about how we're taking it personal. We also have to think about the context and the framing for the entire circumstance. So let's see where we are going next. Oftentimes we focus on the it. What are we taking personal? That thing that occurred. It is the tip of this iceberg. It's a behavior. It is something that's observable. It is something that we can feel, that we can hear, that we are conscious of. However, the piece that we often miss is everything below the iceberg. It's all the stuff we talked about. It's the cycle of socialization. It is the identity circle. It's the power dynamics that show up in the space. And oftentimes, too often, we are only reacting to the what, and we're reacting to the it, instead of considering everything else that exists beyond the surface, not just for that person, but also for us. How is our identity circle showing up in the space? How are we flexing power or not flexing power? Oftentimes, I find myself being most defensive, taking it most personal when I am the target, right? When it is someone of power who is actually saying something about my, maybe my deliverable, right? Who doesn't understand all the nuances, everything that happened under the iceberg. That's where we have to be skillful in our own recovery, and we'll talk about that in just a second. All right, you all are doing a great job in hanging in there. So I want to give us a little bit of breathing room and a break, and just give us a couple seconds to sort of debrief. If you have any questions, I'll check the chat box. Oh, Portia, you put mail too. Thank you. I'll check the chat box if anyone has any questions. This is just sort of your breather, and we're going to switch gears. All right, I see some thumbs up. So, told y'all he was going to make an appearance. This is Sir Miko. He's also, actually, he's right behind me. I thought I was going to have to kick him out because he likes to bark, but he's being all right now. So, in part of my understanding and unpacking of people, I love to use case studies. I have a really good girlfriend who always tells me, you're not that important and you're not that special. And it's, I know, I think I'm a little important, but she's like, you're not that special. This occurs, whatever dynamic you are experiencing occurs with other people. It occurs in other places, and you can work through that. So the way I like to work through a lot of interpersonal issues is to think about dynamics from a different perspective. The best perspective and the best case study I have to offer that I see every single day is my dog. So this is what I've learned from Miko in thinking about interpersonal dynamics. The first thing is thinking about the science of communication. How are we actually wired? So a dog is a dog. We can obviously identify that we are human beings, right? And a dog is a different form of mammal. We are wired biologically different. However, communication is a common experience for all beings. There are various forms of communication. And what I learned about the science of communication is that our brain actually translates and transmits based on symbols. So why can I teach Miko how to sit, how to stay, how to jump, how to fetch, how to roll over, and all the other stuff that he does as a circus dog? It's because it's not because he understands the word S-I-T that's coming out of my mouth, but it's that he has associated a behavior with a sound that comes out of my mouth, and his brain has translated that into a physical reaction within his body, right? So it's not that he understands what the word sit means, but he's associated that sound and a hand motion with a behavior for self. Why is that important? Oftentimes we think about what triggers us. It's not the thing, it's what we've assigned to the thing in our brain, right? It's when we hear that someone says, well, you need to redo this. What is that triggering for me? Well, redo means in my brain that it wasn't adequate, right? Redo in their brain can mean actually we just need to change the formatting to fit a different template. So a lot of our taking it personal has to do with the way we are physiologically wired and how we have trained our body to understand and to accept messaging along the way. If that is true, then that works both directions. So we have to realize that just as my brain is translating symbols, your brain is translating symbols, and whatever that ouch was that I felt when you said that you weren't pleased with the service I provided, when you tell me that how I showed up in a space actually wasn't edifying or helpful for you, when you question the integrity of my work, right? That is coming from a place in your brain where you have equated symbols with a certain action or reaction. I have done the same thing for self. How do we get those messages to communicate in a way where it's not toxic or detrimental for me as a professional or a person and for us in our relationship? Let's talk through some best practices. I love this quote. It sort of prepares us for where we're going, knowing that conflict is truly inevitable. Those of you who know me, like being adverse to conflict is not really a thing for me. I'm willing to have the hard conversations. Let's do it. Let's talk through it. I want to understand. You need to understand, and then we can go our separate ways after that. However, the combat piece is optional, and this is often where we find ourselves when we're taking it personal. So what does this look like in practice? Sorry, y'all. Trying to get there. There we go. Okay. These are some of the best practices that I've come up with that I utilize for a lot of different things. Understanding who you are dealing with and the situation or circumstances surrounding it. So I use this example. I have a girlfriend who I love dearly. We used to work together, and I would tell people often, if she has not had 2 cups of coffee, do not come in this office asking her questions. That may seem really trivial, right? However, when we think about ways in which we show up for self and how other people show up for us also, we have to think about the context. Was there something traumatic that happened for that person? Is this triggering something? Last year, after we did all of our employee evaluations, you know, things got really, really hectic around here and really hard. Is this the same time of year? Did we just finish evaluations? What is the context surrounding the behavior that we're seeing that we're not necessarily proud of for self or for that other person? Think about the characters. I'm not sure how many of you saw the reincarnated version of the Muppets a couple years ago. I enjoyed it, sort of. Didn't really last long. But the thing that I appreciate about this is that Miss Piggy is Miss Piggy is Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy shows up as her full self. She has been the same Miss Piggy since it was toys in my Happy Meal at McDonald's when I was little. So when she was on a pirate ship upside down in a miniskirt, and now coming back as a talk show host. Miss Piggy has been who she is 100% tried and true in every single context. You have to know who you're dealing with. If you're taking it personal from someone whose identity circle you don't know or understand, a client that you've only seen one time when you were delivering service, or a friend who you know their entire history, right? You have to think about the person. What happens in this particular interaction is never an isolated event. It is always connected to something bigger and deeper, including who that person is and how they are going to be able to show up. So we have to keep our characters in mind. I always say enter into a space with a spirit of curiosity. Questions always help us get to a better place if we ask them correctly. Being accusatory via question isn't a real question, but asking a question for clarification for self absolutely helps to take the sting out of things. So is it that you didn't like this because it doesn't look exactly like you pictured it? Or is it that you don't necessarily like it because it doesn't look good on you physically, right? So let's be very clear when someone is throwing a shot or a jab, or if we're internalizing things in a very specific way, that we ask the right questions to help move us towards the place we need to go. So I'm going to do a little bit of circling back around to Miko. Hierarchy is always important. I realize I'm a little bit over time, so if folks need to jump off, feel free to jump off. We did start a little bit late, but I will not be offended if you need to exit, and I will continue the recording. So I want you to think about hierarchy. We talked about power. Positional power is always important. I use this picture of Miko because I am the alpha in my house. I am the alpha dog. He does not pay any bills. He didn't put anything on my mortgage. I make sure that we keep a roof over our head and the heat is on. As such, Miko is not allowed on furniture unless he is invited. So what does that look like for us? How are we thinking about the dynamics of power at play in this particular situation? Not just the power of the other person, but the power of self. Go back to that dominant and non-dominant. How is power showing up in this place? And how does that need to shift how I'm thinking about the situation in this particular example? Know your audience. That's sort of very similar to the character piece. Who is it that you're dealing with? How are you going to be able to move a particular initiative or movement forward given who is at play here? Know your own triggers. So this picture in particular, I have a 2-year-old nephew who loves my dog, and Miko doesn't really love him back, to be honest. So the how this shows up is Miko runs and hides when my nephew is over, and my nephew chases him around, tries to grab his tail. Neither of this is helpful for either party, right? So what do? I put out Miko's kennel whenever my nephew is around because his kennel is his safe space. So now Miko has a place to retreat. My nephew can still see him and they can interact, but there is with a boundary in place that keeps them both safe. Know your trigger. If you are about to engage in a difficult conversation with someone, do whatever you need to do in order to be okay in that circumstance and recognize all those things that we talked about earlier when that ouch occurs. You all mentioned I shut down, I said my blood pressure rises, someone said I curse. If you are aware of your reaction, then you also have to be aware of what triggers that reaction in order to temper it. Be very clear about what you need in a situation. If there is an instance where there is a situation and you are taking it personal, what is it that you need from this? Do I need time to reflect? Do I need to flee? Do I need an opportunity to rectify this with the person that I'm taking it personal from? So be very clear about what you need in that moment or after in order to move yourself to the next space. And then here's a little bit of a cheat sheet. We talked about that one drop in the bucket. Any instance where we're taking it personal is still reflective of all of those things we talked about today. It's the tip of the iceberg to everything else that's going on underneath the water. It's the identity circle for you and for them. It is differences in various aspects of our identity and dimensions of our identity. It is thinking about how power and privilege shows up in a space, right? Everything is that psychosocialization. This is not an isolated incident. It is connected to something that is bigger and deeper. And as such, we have to remember it is one drop in the bucket. Focus on the problem, not the person. This is HR 101. We never want to deal with the person. We want to address the issue or the behavior that is showing up, whether it's for self. I don't want to beat Erica up. I want to think about, Erica, why are you choosing to react in this way? Because as we can see, the next one, or actually 2 down, I am 100% my responsibility. It is not the other person's responsibility to make sure that I am okay in the way that we are interacting, because I have to be 100% my own responsibility. That means I am responsible for how I show up. I am also responsible for how I react, right? Going into a situation or even during a situation, make sure that we control the variables that are truly controllable. We want to make sure that the setting is one that is going to be positive as possible. If I know that this is someone that I don't need to interact with in the morning because I have not had my yoga, I have not had my meditation, I have not had my coffee, then don't schedule a meeting with that person in the morning. What are you doing to protect yourself against the inevitable, right? There's going to be some conflict, but how do I control the variables at play? If I know this person gets super, super defensive whenever I bring up their work style, then how can I bring in a mediator? How can I bring in someone to have the conversation a little different? Or how can I approach this in a way that feels a little neutral and not a personal attack? Control the variables that you can control. Become skillful in recovery. I mentioned this earlier. All of this is a process. When we think about our own learning curve, the trajectory of our own development, we have to make sure that it is an active process. We are organic. The systems we operate in are organic, meaning that we are living, breathing organisms, and we operate in systems that are living and breathing. We have to be skillful in how we bounce back, meaning that we learn from that engagement, or are we going to continue to perpetuate the very thing that did not work, including what hurt us? What was that ouch? the thing that we took personal. The last thing is that objective reflection is a non-negotiable. This is what I mean here. If we want to stop taking it personal, we have to understand the stop part, we have to understand the it part, and we have to understand the personal part, right? What is it about me in this situation that was a trigger? What happened, the it, in a way that I can either try to mitigate or fix? And then what can I stop or change or remedy in that situation? And this has to be an active practice. This is not, I check a box and now I'm automatically wired to not take things personal. This is an active practice that we have to curate time and time again with our skillful recovery. I didn't know I was going to take that thing personal until I took it personal, right? So now how do I learn from it in a way that allows me to not repeat that same thing so that it does not become toxic to me? I believe we have one more slide. So this is your homework. You're going to sit with some stuff. Think about your ouch. Think about those areas where you said you most often feel like you take it personal. Sit with it. Why? Really unpack for yourself the why behind that ouch, behind the taking it personal. Is it because actually I have some underlying challenges with this person, and then that one drop in the bucket was a reason enough for us to have conflict, right? Or is it really that I have my own insecurities and now it's showing up and reflected in this issue and now I'm taking it personal? Is it that this person just does not know how to communicate with me and so I can't take that personal because that's on them, right? So we have to sit with some stuff. Figure out what you want to keep. That's my stay. What works well enough for me right now that I want to keep this tool in my toolbox? I want to make sure that I keep it with me on deck because it does work. And then what do I need to bury? What are those bones that need to go in the backyard because it's not working? I need to take it out the rusty old toolbox and put it away. Me shutting down does not get us anywhere, right? Me maybe falling out or even cursing or having some type of actual reaction in the moment doesn't really move us to a healthy place either. So what do I need to bury in order for us, me, to continue to operate in a way that is edifying and safe and also helps me to develop? Fetch. What do I need to practice? What are some places that, you know what, this works really well and I need an opportunity to try it on a little bit more? So Erica, how are you gracious with yourself when you do take things personal, right? And still allow yourself to say, and move forward and continue to work with that person. So what are some things I want to actively try on? I want to go fetch. I want to try this out, and hold yourself accountable there. And then what are some new things that you can try? If the yelling, if the shutting down, if even the how I take it personal, why I take it personal has not been working for me, then what can I figure out that is new to add to my toolkit that I can try on for self? So your homework is to think about those categories. Sit, stay, bury, fetch, and try a new trick. We have come to the end of our time together. I thank you all for hanging out with me for a little while longer. If you have any questions, if I can get back on the screen, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I will try to get this back to the PowerPoint if I can. So I will keep the chat box open for just a second. If anyone has any questions, or if you want to turn off your mute, you can also do that. There we go. If not, know that you all are absolutely amazing. That was great. Give one example of the new. Okay, great. Good question, Hallie. So one example of the new. I don't like emailing a whole lot. I feel like it's a waste of my typing time, especially if I'm emailing a colleague that I can pick up and have a conversation with, because I learn via auditory quite a bit. However, I realize that some folks need things in writing in order to process differently. Hearing things out of my mouth, especially when this is what you're met with, sometimes is a little difficult for folks, right? So one of the trying on new for me is I've been writing things down. If I have a conflict with a colleague, for instance, and usually I would go and talk it out because that's Erica's style, I've instead had to resort to, and sometimes, typing everything out, and not in an accusatory way, but more in a fact way. Because me going through the facts with you in person may sound like I'm attacking you. So I've been told. So instead, if I lay things out in writing, that may be a new trick for me to use to neutralize the situation. Every trick may not work for every circumstance, right? And every trick is not going to work for every person. But in that instance, because when you see this and I'm having a conversation with you, you shut down. One of the new tricks I need to use is how can I put this in writing in a way that this person can process and think about it, and then we come back to the table. That's an example of a new trick. Hallie, was that helpful? Yes. Anyone else? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Portia. Thanks, Amy. Amy left. So if you need any follow-up, all my information is on the screen. I think all of you know how to reach me regardless. Thank you all for sharing so much. Please send me feedback if you have it. I would love to hear from you. Would also love to hear if there's any particular topic you would like for me to develop for next month's webinar. I'm open to suggestions. Hallie you have a question mark? Hallie, can you take your, hold on. I took you off of mute, Hallie. What were you trying to say?
Oh, my bad. I was going to say, is this able to be watched again?
I am recording it according to Go Meeting. We're going to see what that means.
Okay.
So we'll see what that means.
Can you send it out?
Yes, if the recording does work, I will send the recording to everyone. And I think it also shows the screen, so you'll have the PowerPoint too.
Okay, good. I was screenshotting some, but I didn't think of that to be in.
Yeah, will do.
Okay, that was great.
Well, I appreciate y'all for joining me. Thank you for hanging out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you all so much, and y'all have a good night. Be safe, everyone.